All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's REMI webinar, Measuring University Economic Impact using REMI PROSERIS. This webinar is being presented by Dr. Indranil Kumar from Purdue University, Shreya Gurav from REMI, and Peter Trays from REMI. I'm Brian Reel, and I'm thrilled to be the host of this presentation. At REMI, our mission is to inform public policy. For over 40 years now, we have provided software that allows government and non-government decision makers to test the economic effects of their policies before they're implemented. We work in the fields of economic development, tax, transportation, energy and environment, equity, and much more. If you have any questions about REMI specifically, I encourage you to reach out to us at info@proseris.com, and we'd gladly connect you with the appropriate member of our team. I will now introduce each of our speakers. Dr. Indranil Kumar is the director for the Purdue Center of Regional Development, or PCRD. Indranil has been at PCRD since its inception in 2005. He focuses on regional demographics, economic and workforce analysis, identification of new sources of data, GIS databases, spatial analysis, and quantitative methods. Shreya Gurav has been working at REMI for just under 2 years now. Most of her focus has been taxation, economic development, university studies, and transportation projects. Peter Trays is a member of the business development team at REMI, and he specializes in REMI PROSERIS and related projects. If at any point during this presentation you have a question, I encourage you to enter it into the question box, and time permitting, we will moderate these questions to our speakers. We should have plenty of time, so if you have any questions, definitely encourage you to enter them. Also during this time, a button will appear asking if you would like to sign up for a personalized PROSERIS demo. Shortly after the presentation concludes, you will be receiving a copy of the slides and a recording to your email. If you have any questions from those materials, again, please reach out to us. And finally, I want to let everyone know about a new GoToWebinar feature that allows you to zoom in on the screen. We got a lot of feedback that some charts or graphs were hard to see, so you can actually click into the viewer and scroll in and out to zoom in or to zoom out, and then you can drag it around as well. I hope you find this helpful. Now, just for the structure of the presentation, Indranil will begin with a presentation by discussing Purdue University's recent economic impact study, and then the REMI team will demonstrate how REMI PROSERIS can be used to conduct similar analyses. That's enough for me from now. Thank you again to everyone for joining, and take it away, Indranil.
Thank you, Brian. Greetings from West Lafayette. This is Purdue University main campus. And today I'm going to talk about the economic contributions and impact analysis we completed recently. Now, I do not need to reiterate the importance of colleges and universities at this juncture of time to convey their economic value, especially to the decision maker. And this study is actually based on 2024 calendar year data. And there you can see some of the direct expenditure categories which we were able to account for by using the REMI policy insight plus model. So operation and maintenance and new constructions, including expenditures and spending for consulting fees, then off-campus student expenditure, and also spending by visitors to the athletic event. Now, if you are working in a university, you are familiar with, or your accounting department is familiar with, IPET's data system, and that is how the accounting is available in general cases, most of the cases. And then, these categories can be useful to gather the input data that is needed for REMI model. So, the spending in the class of, instruction, scholarship, all the way up to scientific R&D. And I should mention that this study is based on expenditures. And we only accounted for the main campus of Purdue University in West Lafayette. We could not account for, the research park, which is another huge R&D establishments with all the enterprises that are operating there. And then also the PARI, which is the Purdue Applied Research Institute, and then multiple manufacturing establishments which are there on campus and around campus, industry university partnerships. And then also the local economic impacts because of the attendees who are attending conferences and visitors to convocations, we could not account for those this time, including, lifetime earnings for the STEM graduates. Next slide, please. Yeah, so going a little bit, I want to cover for the literature review. We did a literature review. We were covering some journal articles and some reports. A lot of studies have been done for university impact analysis. But this is important to understand that there are some differences when there is a university which is land grant versus non-land grant, and then public versus private universities. And especially if you are a land grant university, then, of course, teaching, research and discovery and public engagement becomes important, which means there are some services which are statewide. So Purdue is a land grant university, and when we were looking into the spending data, we had to account for that. Some of the services goes into public service category, and those expenditures are statewide, right? And then a lot of journal articles have, established that, it is good to have a counterfactual, develop a counterfactual, but which can be very challenging in any economic impact analysis, especially for an institution which has been in existence for hundreds of years. But this is something where literature is pointing to. Similarly, how you can make your studies robust. Some of the methods were also stochastic method. In general, two major areas were the supply side and the demand side, the way you can look into the university impact study. So the demand side, which is basically, university as a consumer is spending on goods and services, that is how, we try to approach it. And, as the economic impacts can be, generative impacts, distributive, or, just a transfer. But in case of universities, especially if there are major R&D investments going on, then there could be substantial generative impacts. Next slide, please. And then, economic impacts can be, linear and additive, but not in case of institutions where, knowledge and, new skilled human capital and labor force, those are getting developed. So probably, having a general equilibrium model is more robust instead of just a general input-output simulation. And then another aspect which can be included is, potential increase in lifelong earning of the graduates if you have the data. And we could not incorporate those this time, but this is something we are thinking in the direction. And then, the sporting events, the athletic events, if they are happening at regular intervals, they can have, local and regional economic impacts and economic contributions. But then some scholars have suggested that, better to explore the net instead of gross economic activities as a result of these, sporting events. So some of the message from the literature was that how will you delineate the geographical area of the impact? And that is very important, whether it is going to be statewide, counties, or regions. It all depends on the kind of university that is doing the study. And then the caution about double counting so that, you have mutually exclusive categories and you are able to distribute the dollars properly. And your accounting department can be very helpful in that. And then, scholars have pointed that focus on net economic activities. A missing piece in the literature, which we tried to consider in this effort, was including the aspects of on-site, hybrid, and remote workers. because after COVID, a lot of universities, most of us have a significant portion of labor force, considerable portion of labor force, which are online, working remotely or hybrid. And another aspect which we could not cover was, the enrollment and expenditures that is happening because of online classes. So, Purdue West Lafayette has the main campus, but there is Purdue Global, which has another 30,000 enrolled students, and West Lafayette has the entire administrative structure. So we did not account for those, but we know that many universities will be going in that direction as well. So that is also something to consider. Next slide, please. So what we have here is about $3.19 billion. That was the spending or expenditure that we could get, excluding some of those categories I mentioned previously. Now, these are annual estimates. Your accounting department will be able to give you the fiscal data easily, but upon request, they were able to give us the annual estimate. And then, $2.3 billion included direct R&D expenditure, which we could account for close to $400 million. But another piece that was embedded was that every department had R&D expenditures, and majority of those expenditures, in $2.3 billion was there, including, maintenance, teaching, and all those facilities that is going on. And the operations, we knew operations and maintenance activities, those are very detailed data available, which we had access to. So $785 million is off-campus student expenditure, and that is coming from the annual survey that the university department is conducting. Our students department, it's an annual survey. They are, and so that they can really estimate that off-campus students what are the expenditures, and on-campus students what are the expenditures. New construction data are available. And then for athletic event, the visitor expenditure, we were able to estimate. Just some of the stats. What we have here is current enrollment in West Lafayette campus is 58,000. Statewide enrollment is close to 75,000 plus, Purdue Global, I mentioned, 30,000 or something. Our tuition fee is frozen for 14 consecutive years. And that's why, the economic impact study became important for us. Next slide, please. So very quickly on, some of the methods we utilized to estimate some of the data. So 785 million off-campus was easy because the department gave us all the survey results, including categories in housing, food, books, transportation, and miscellaneous. And REMI Policy Insight has a very detailed, consumption categories available. So in case of miscellaneous, we were able to also do some assumption so that various consumer spending categories, which we could include, distribute the data that way. And then the next one was visitors. So we knew from the athletic department, what are the tickets purchases between students and non-students, but, we do not have a mechanism of collecting the zip codes or information for non-student ticket purchases. In that case, what we did was we had placer.ai. You might have heard of that. It's a visitor information tool. And we geofenced our main stadium and also sampled another stadium, but we mainly used the main stadium data. We geofenced that. We knew all the major sports activities, sports event that had happened. And we collected the visitor data, especially those visitors who spent, more than 30 minutes inside the stadium. We knew their zip code. And once we knew their zip code, we could distribute the geography, and we knew how many visitors were there from, the main county, which is the Tippecanoe County, home county, rest of Indiana, and outside of Indiana. And then the spending on food, fuel, and accommodation, we just did some assumption. Again, there are, some articles also available, journal articles in this way. where, some of the surveys have been done. We use some of those and assumed to get an estimate, but most of these are very conservative estimate. And then, here are the data available, of the employees who are, in Tippecanoe and rest of Indiana, and who are working from outside of Indiana. It has come to this level, about 11% or something are currently close to that number outside of Tippecanoe County. But this is almost like a stable proportion. So we accounted for that in the model. So next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Yes. So the model, the previous slide. The model is actually based on, three region, which is, Tippecanoe County, rest of Indiana, and rest of US. And this is important, this appropriate geography, which was, all the literature was pointing to, because Purdue Extension offices is in every county in Indiana, and so is Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So those expenditure and all those had to be accounted for, the statewide. And then there are some categories of spending for which we had to use the policy variable, where we nullified, induced investments from expenditures. And this is also very important, because, these expenditures are happening, every year. So a major part gets nullified. But then R&D investment, you do not need to nullify, because, we all know that new ventures come out of it. Now, we are in process of, trying to understand our alumni occupations and their job locations. But we could not include all those information, including lifelong earning, at this time, at this version of the contributions analysis, because we know, engineering, pharmacy, management, and vet school, they have, much higher earning potential, the graduates. And if you have a medical school, even, or a dental school, even a higher earning potential, and that can actually enrich, your contributions and impact analysis. So let us talk a little bit about results. Next slide. So yeah, so we have, we estimated that, in terms of GDP, supported and created around, $6.5 billion in total. There is like a specific to the county, Tippecanoe County, $3 billion, and then, the state GDP. And then total jobs in Indiana, close to 29,000, knowing, 19,000 jobs are getting supported, in total by the university main campus. And then, some demographic information. There was also an interest to know how the university is contributing to the state demographics. Next slide, please. So the next set of results, so REMI Policy Insight can give you very detail on, what kind of economic metric are there. And we reported these economic metric at different geographic level, because, currently, we need to inform, not only the county decision maker, but especially the state decision maker and even federal, that, we are contributing, the university operations have, some major contribution, understanding that this was only an impact study based on a portion of that, the entire expenditure and services that are happening. Next slide, please. And then these are just, differences in gross domestic product, or GRP, and then some of the personal income. And then the final slide on results are, next slide, is a much more detail on some of the demographic indicators. Is it supporting population? Is it adding some economic migrant and labor force? And what is happening, to the labor participation rate? And these numbers, especially, at the county level, where the home county is, and the remainder of the Indiana. And then the final slide, some of the discussion, next slide, is, couple of things, the spillovers. The universities are such a large operation. that yes, major impacts are happening at the county, but the spillovers are happening statewide and even beyond the state. And it's not only about the economic effects, but also important are the demographic contributions. And that's where REMI Policy Insight Plus model can be helpful, because there is a demographic model also included there, especially labor force participation rate. And then just some of the bullet points on what were the main features, what were the main results. And then hopefully as we go forward, and we kind of establish a procedure for more data collection and some of the missing categories, and then also incorporating probably some of the stochastic methods as as they were mentioned and included in the journal article. And then the final slide, which is the next slide, is all acknowledgement to different team members, reviewers from REMI, and that's all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Indranil, for the excellent presentation. For the next part of the presentation, we'll be passing it to Peter Trays.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Indranil, for a great presentation there on looking at the university impacts of Purdue University using the REMI PI Plus model. And good afternoon, everyone. My name's Peter Trays. I'm a senior business analyst here at REMI. And for this next part of the presentation, my colleague Shreya will be demonstrating how our new model, PROSERIS, can also be used to run these types of university impact studies. And I'll just give a brief introduction to PROSERIS before she begins with that. So we developed our new model, PROSERIS, built on the same underlying legacy model as PI Plus, the policy insight model that Indranil was using for that impact study. And what we did was build it on the same legacy model, but with new accessible user interface. It's web-based as well, and we're focusing the inputs on economic development, on university impact, on tourism, and we've included a built-in report generation tool as well to streamline kind of the communication side of these reports. So we're definitely very excited to have you guys take a look at PROSERIS here. And my colleague Brian will also do a poll later on where you'll be able to indicate if you're interested in a personalized look or an extended demo, getting access to one of those later at the end of the webinar. So I can be following up to get in touch if you have any questions after the webinar as well. And yeah, we have a long history working with universities here at REMI. Our models have been used, are used on the research side as well as in the classroom at many different institutions, and definitely would be happy to connect and share some more of the work that we've done in the space after the webinar. And I hope all of you continue enjoying the presentation today, and definitely hope to connect soon. So with that, I will pass it off to my colleague Shreya to continue with the PROSERIS demo, and then I'll jump back on for the Q&A at the end as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. All right, let's jump right into the model. Let's do a scenario. This is the PROSERIS interface, the dashboard, where you can create new projects. So let's go to a new project. And we have a couple of templates, but today we'll be focusing on university footprint study. And then it lets you give a little name to your project. We say university footprint analysis. And then it's a very interactive tool, as Peter mentioned. This is a little blurb where you can describe your project or your study. So in the end, like Peter mentioned, it gives you a report generation. So if you put a description of your project, it'll kind of tailor the report to what the project is about. We can just put a small little title of university impact analysis, but you can spend a little more time if you want to tailor your report to the project. And then it gives you an option to consider what kind of inputs you have, what kind of analysis you want to do, and consider what options. So university employment is essentially your faculty plus admin who are employed at the university. Graduate research impacts are students who are graduated and then find employment. Student expenditures, we capture off-campus student expenditures, maybe in food services, beverages, transportation, accommodation, or retail trade, and things like that. Sporting events, a lot of colleges have sport events, basketball games, or like a lot of other games. So we capture like the ticket sales or people coming in, maybe parents or friends coming in, and then creating that activity, and then new construction activity. So I will be doing all of these today. And it asks you the year or the time frame of the project. So let's do 2026. And most of these projects typically run for 1 year, but just to show, this is very hypothetical, just to show a time series dynamic aspect, I'm going to do a 5-year scenario, keeping the same inputs. So this is asking, do you have information about university employed, and do you have that split up into how many are faculty and how many are admin? So if you do have that categorization, you can go ahead and say yes. And if you don't have, you can put the totals in and say, no, I only have the employment totals. And then what the model does is that when you put in those totals, it splits in a ratio of 2:3 or maybe 2:1, depending on a general category. So right now I do have the split. So I'm going to put 1425 in my education, service, private industry. I'm going to keep that constant for another 5 years. And then it lets you select your units. I'm just going to say units. And then how many are administrative? Let's do keeping it as units. Now it asks you, do you have graduate student employment numbers? A lot of these data sources, like Dr. Kumar mentioned earlier in the webinar, that you can find this information either on college websites or Department of Education or iPads. And then it asks you about student expenditures. So we divide student expenditures into 4 essential categories: housing, food and beverage, books and supplies, and transportation. If you do have those information or total expenditures broken down for those 4 categories, then you can say, yes, I do have the data for these categories, but if you have the totals of it, you can just hit no. And then it just lets you put in the total number for, oh, that's too high. It's 100. Okay. Now let's say 100 million as student expenditures. And these are the sporting events. We can keep that at 35 million. And then we have construction expenditures. Let's say 60 million. And then it says, would you like REMI's recommended units? So if you say yes, then REMI would provide units that are more generalized, depending on all the projects. But if you feel like you want specific units and this project is very specific, then you can hit and say, no, I want to use my own units. But let's say yes. And that's all. Like when it comes to inputs, you can just say open review page, and then it'll take you to this review page. You can look at your inputs. You can see when the project is beginning, 2026, it ends 2030. And in the background, it's kind of running the simulation right now. So till that time, you can just take an overview of the project. you can see the employment numbers we put in 1425 in administration. Oh, there we go. Our simulation is completed. But yes, this is an overview of employment, sales, and project timeline. And now let's look at the results. So we have an employment multiplier and impact summary, which kind of gives you total employment, direct, indirect, induced jobs, GDP, and personal income over the time of your project. So like we said, we have direct jobs coming directly from construction spending, indirect jobs and induced jobs. So basically this is kind of telling you that, okay, there's construction spending, there's university employment, there's student employment. So now these people are also spending in the economy, creating that economic activity and kind of creating those induced and indirect effects. But what is the dynamic aspect of this? Is that once you create that induced and indirect effects, it kind of attracts a lot of people into the region. So those demographic changes are what are dynamic in this model, is that, okay, these people are getting salaries, both students and universities. They maybe spend in downtown region. They kind of they spend in downtown region. Then they create that economic activity, they create that spending, which is making the region attractive economically. So you have economic migrants coming in. And so to satisfy now new demand, we have increased investment in the industry over time, and then it stabilizes. And then once you have total employment is kind of stable over time, and then you have total population kind of increasing over time, is as a place becomes economically attractive, you have economic migration coming in, and that's increasing the regional population. And then we have inflation numbers. And you can also see the employment by sector. You can see this changes over time. And then impacts to the industry output. And then we can also look at population changes. So on the right side, we have the population changes in terms of what is the total population of the region. And out of these total population, what is the labor force participation? So if the total population is 6,808, out of these 5,200 are labor force, and out of this, economic migrants are 1,500. And then not only that, on the left side, you can see, okay, if you're getting economic migrants, you're getting this population, but what is the age group of this population? So you have most of the people in working age population from 25 to 64. And then you can also look at the investment impacts, which is in relation to demographic changes. So if people are coming in, you probably might have demand for housing, accommodation. So more demand will create more investment opportunities in residential housing. So you can see all of those impacts over time. You can also see the consumer price changes for rental, non-farm, natural gas, and electricity. And we can see changes in production cost over time. We see the changes in the sectors that are most affected, like real estate. If people coming and there's more demand, there'll probably be more production of housing or accommodation units. And then we can also look at the relative housing prices over time. Now this is an incline, but in a percentage terms, they're pretty small. And then employment distribution, we have professional scientific services, educational services, administrative service. And you can also look at the output for 2030. This is the last year of the simulation. So like employment, we got professional and scientific services. That is because of those graduate students getting employed, and also the university employed people that is creating those educational service jobs. But not only that, the induced indirect effects and the dynamic aspects of it is also saying that, okay, not only these jobs, but then they create the economic activity that generates jobs in surrounding industries like retail, trade, food services, wholesale, construction over time. And then we do have a report feature, which is right here. So this report you can edit with AI. That's an edit with AI option. And then it just kind of helps you summarize the report or expand or shorten the report. Kind of gives you the executive summary of whatever the analysis you did. So this is a university impact, to kind of give you an executive summary of what the impact was, what kind of inputs went into it, and then kind of also give you the results in terms of how did consumption change over the 5 years of the analysis, how is spending changing, label 4 is the key economic results. And in the end, it has an appendix table that kind of explains the connections between these policy variables. And you can export this to Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or one-pager in case you want to download it on your desktop. Yeah, that is all for the simulation. Please let us know if you have any questions along the way. We'll be happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shreya, for the excellent presentation. I also want to thank Indranil and Peter as well for some great contributions to this analysis. I wanted to mention that we will shortly be getting into the Q&A portion of the presentation. We've received a lot of really great questions so far, so please do keep them coming. We have plenty of time to go over them. And then I also will go ahead and display that poll, which Peter and I mentioned earlier. So it should appear on your screen now. If you answer yes to it, we will definitely be in touch to schedule that personalized demo. I also want to mention that shortly after this presentation concludes, we will be sending a copy of the slides and the recording to your email that you used to register. I hope that once you have time to look at these materials closer, if you have anything to add to the discussion or any questions for us, please do let us know. And while this poll is going, I will begin asking some of the questions that we have received. The first question received is for Indranil. How did you account for students that commute versus students that live on campus? And what if these students live in a different county than you were analyzing?
So yeah, so the transportation component from the survey provides that information for off-campus student. It's a proper sample survey that is getting done. And I think I mentioned that the university has frozen tuition fees for 14 years. Probably it is the only institution. And then we provide very detailed estimate of spending to parents. So if you are on campus versus what are the possibilities and off campus. So yes, we were able to account for that. The transportation, it was a separate category in the consumption. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Indranil. We had another question for you as well. You mentioned $40 million in spending by visitors to athletic events. Does this dramatically differ depending on how popular or successful the college teams are doing?
It is a very, very conservative estimate. We were trying to get some survey data for athletic visitors, and we could not get hold of it. And I know that some states are better in a better position for that kind of data. And so one task from this is, because we are part of Office of Engagement, right, administration and everything, is also to come up with some pointers on how to improve the data collection. And one of them includes also, trying to capture the expenditure patterns. I mean, some of our athletic events have like 75,000 people attending. That's how we were cross-checking the placer.ai data. So yeah, but good question. Yeah, and I think I mentioned that it's very conservative estimate.
Awesome. Thank you again, Indranil. Another question we received is other university activities such as homecoming, commencement, conferences, symposiums may also generate some type of significant economic impact. Are you considering these for future improvements to your model?
That's correct. Yes. There are conferences, convocations, sales of books and all those things. And, especially the LMs, because we were knowing that especially for athletic event, how many people are coming from outside of Indiana. When they come, they purchase some souvenirs and all those. We could not get to that level of data, but definitely they add to the local and regional economy.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question received is, what's the difference between doing an analysis like this with a static versus dynamic model?
I can take that one. So I think with the static and the dynamic aspect, with the static, you can get the direct and indirect induced effects. But really when the dynamic aspect, as I mentioned while explaining the results, is that when you look at the dynamic aspect, you not only consider that the direct jobs, but you're saying that, hey, these are the direct jobs coming from universities or students out of it. But what happens after that? They're spending in those regions. They're creating that economic activity, which is making that region kind of more attractive for demographic changes. So the demographic aspects of it is really what the dynamic model captures, is that, okay, this region is attractive, so there are more economic migrants coming into the region, and they're going to go and spend into the region and create additional economic activity. And then once they create the economic activity, they're increasing demand, which kind of also dynamically captures the investment effects that come into the region. Okay, people are now going to invest in maybe housing categories to kind of match up with the demand of these increasing population or economic migration. So really the dynamic aspect is capturing is the demographic changes and the investment changes. Kind of gives you the total impact of it, which kind of the static model a little underestimates. And that is why the multiplier could be higher than a static model.
And maybe let me just add it from implementation point of view. If you are sure of your expenditure and spending year by year, then yeah, please go ahead and you add and run that simulation. REMI has the capacity. But in our case, we knew that our R&D expenditures have really increased. So next time we run it, it is going to be a huge one because of Department of Defense and all those things. A lot of projects that are happening now.
Excellent. Thank you, Shreya and Indranil. Another question received is, does the model account for economic differences between regions?
Yeah, we can look at economic differences between regions. I don't think I mentioned this, but you can look at the impacts for a state, a county, or MSA regions. So you can kind of like, yes, you have the option to customize your region, look at the impacts of that specific region.
Awesome. I also just wanted to say that our team customizes each model with different data depending on the state and region as well. So that's another important piece, that if we did this exact simulation as Shreya did it in another county, it would have different results because of that. Excellent. Another question we received is, can we use REMI for a university expansion project?
Yes, absolutely. And in that way, you do not need to nullify induced investments, right? So when you nullify that, you are again taking a conservative approach, because you know that these services are happening year over year, but expansion is purely new dollars and new investments. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question received is, can the model show impact on different types of businesses?
Yes, it can.
Yeah.
We just did not include it, Miss, in the slides and all those, but yes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question received is, because REMI models are dynamic and general equilibrium based, how does PROSERIS capture feedback effects from university growth, like wage increases, migration responses, and price changes, compared to more static input-output approaches?
Yeah, I can answer a little bit of that, but we can also provide more information if my answer doesn't satisfy completely. But we do look at the price change effects. I can actually go to the model real quick. So when you look at these changes, yeah, these are the consumer price changes for different sectors. You can also look at the relative housing price changes, which is a little down. Yeah, you can look at the housing price changes, the cost of living changes. You can also see how different businesses are being affected by looking at, okay, the outputs and looking at what kind of industries are the most affected. And then, Brian, could you just repeat that question one more time? I'm not sure I'm capturing everything.
Sure, yeah. Because REMI models are dynamic and general equilibrium based, how does PROSERIS capture feedback effects from university growth, like wage increases, migration responses, and price changes, compared to a more static IO approach?
Right, and then we look at migration changes as well. You can look at how many people are coming into the region versus participation of labor force versus the total population and the age group of all of these. And PROSERIS is also, would like to add that it's built on REMI engine. It has the REMI documentation in the background, so it does capture all of those dynamic aspects and feedback effects as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that's actually all the questions we've received at this time. Definitely, if you have any questions, after this concludes, feel free to reach out to us through the emails that were on the slides or at info@remi.com or info@proseris.com, and we'll make sure your question gets in the right hands. I also want to remind everyone that we will be sharing the materials from today's webinar. So once you've had a closer look at the slides or the recording, feel free to reach out to us if anything comes up. We'd be happy to help. And that is enough for me for now. Thank you, Neil, Peter, and Shreya for the excellent presentation. Again, thank you to all who joined and to all who asked questions. And it was a great discussion we just had. I hope you'll attend more REMI webinars in the future. And we hope you have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.